Hello, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar on understanding the Visa Bulletin. I am Ann Rose Johnson Lewis, Director of Legal Services here at Worldwide HealthStaff Solutions. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone who is joining us today for this very important webinar on understanding the Visa Bulletin. And as a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded. Everyone that's registered will get a copy of the webinar emailed to them within 24 hours, okay? All right, so let's just jump right into today's topic. So at first glance, if you're not familiar with the Visa Bulletin, it's a lot of information that's on there. The key thing to remember is what visa am I currently being processed for me, what is my country of birth, and where do I fit in on the current Visa Bulletin. The Visa Bulletin is issued every month. It updates every month. So that means that the country that you're from may be current this month, and then it may not be the following month. As of right now, typically we have 5 countries that's usually not current on the Visa Bulletin, and that is China, India, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico. Our visa category that we're going to be focusing on for this webinar is the E3 visa categories. And as of right now, the only category that is not current for that is India and Mexico. All the other countries are pretty much current as far as your visa being available and issued to you. So this is the point of the Visa Bulletin that is relevant to what we're talking about right now. And as you could see at first glance, E1 is not relevant because that is for treaty investors, and same thing with E2 is an investor category. For RNs, MLTs, and also for nurse aides who are in the E3 category but on the unskilled side, that visa category is current for all these countries where it says all chargeable areas. And if you look at the column for China, you'll see they're processing cases that were filed up to August of 2018. And if you look at India, you'll see they're processing cases that were filed up to June of 2012. All the other visa categories are actually current right now for E3 visas. The other that's highlighted here is for the nurse aide candidates. And as you can see, right now they're processing up to January of 2020 for all chargeable areas except for China, El Salvador, India, and Mexico. You'll see the dates are a bit different with regards to that. The furthest one being, of course, India, that they're processing up to June 15th of 2012. So what that means is that if you are in this other category right now, that's the time frame we are looking at for a visa to become available to you. Is we're now in 2023. So depending on when you file that petition, that's the date that you'll be working with. So if your petition was filed with Worldwide HealthStaff and you're a nurse aide in 2021, and that has been submitted to the U.S. Department of Labor for certification, that would be your priority date. So your processing time will be for a 2021 date, not a 2020 date. So right now for nurse aides, we're looking at about a year and a half out in that particular category, okay? The good news is that this Visa Bulletin gets updated every month. So even though right now we are at 2020 for the nurse aide category, that could change next month, and you could be at a further along in the date. So it could move up a couple of months. It could move up, say for instance, the Visa Bulletin comes out. This category could now be, say, all the way up to August. You never know. And so don't be disappointed or feel discouraged by this date, because this is not a firm date. I mean that they could fluctuate. It just depends on how many visas are available, and the the NVC will push forward the dates for that particular category. All right. So typically, every year, there's about 140,000 visas that are available for EB3 category. Okay. So what that means is every year, Congress and the NVC, they get together and they figure out the number of visas that they're going to be made available. And that is the number that is out every year. So 140,000 visas every year in the EB category. And that, of course, is split between the skilled versus the unskilled visa category. There are certain countries that they have a cap on that's placed on those countries. And that is why you will see some countries being further out than others. And that is based on the number of applicants from that particular country, and the number of visas that's available, and the number of people from that particular country that's already in the US. And that's how they figured how the cap for a particular country will be put in place. So I want to give you some perspective with regards to what the visa category looks like, the number that's available. So this is a perspective for a year's view, correct, right? So in the E3 category, for instance, if you look at this chart that I'm putting up, you'll see in 2021, the E3 category, it was 48,482 visas, okay? If you look, these are people that's on the waiting list. Now remember, 2022, we're right here. You'll see that right now is 41,838 people that's currently waiting on the employment-based category. And then this other slide is going to give us some more perspective with regards to the waiting list or the time for the visa. So if we're focusing on the employment base, which is the third category, skilled workers versus the unskilled workers, okay? So currently, from November last year to November this year, you'll see this is the number total of 168,148 individuals, right? Or in queue waiting for a visa in different categories. This number is important because if you think about all the people that's waiting, this includes all the employment-based categories. It also includes all the family-based petitions, and all these people, depending on where you live, have to still go through the embassy process. And we get a lot of inquiries from our candidates asking, why is their interview taking so long? Why aren't they getting a date? Okay. And that is because all the visas have to unfortunately go through the same embassy at each particular country. And right now we have over 4 million people that's in queue, meaning for over 4 million people worldwide that is waiting for their visas to be processed. Okay, so that is why you'll see a lot of slowdown at the embassy level. Part of that is from COVID. They're still recovering from COVID. A lot of the embassies overseas are short-staffed. They lost some of their workers during that time who never went back. And you had all those people whose appointment got canceled during COVID, and they have to reschedule those appointments. And then you add on top of that, you have the new applications. So it is a very long process. And unfortunately, what that means is Some people, this is not affecting all embassies, but some embassies have longer waiting time than others. So it just depends on what embassy is processing your visa application. You may be waiting longer than others. So I spoke briefly about this consular processing issue. What that means is the embassy that your visas are being processed through. The NVC, is the U.S. agency that makes the final decision on each visa application. That gets sent to the consular or the embassy of your country, and that is where your interviews are being processed. So this just talk about the filing action date, and that is and versus your priority date. So your priority date, of course, is the date that your I-140 petition was approved. That is your priority date, okay? And what that means is if you look at the Visa Bulletin, you'll see, is my country of origin current? And if the answer to that question is yes, then what that means is your visa is being processed based on a timeline and is not necessarily based on the availability of the visa. So that means the visa for your country, if it says current, that visa is immediately available. Okay? That visa is immediately available, and the only time that you will have with the consular processing is just the processing side. The only time that you will hit any delays in your case, as I mentioned before, is depending on the embassy that is going to be scheduling your interview, or if during the process before your visa got approved, you had something, you had a delay in having the fee bill issued, or there was a delay in an RFE that was issued on your case, and then that will slow down the process. So if none of those things happen to you during this whole entire process, you are very lucky. Consider yourself very lucky. And then your case will make it to the local embassy for your interview within, we're seeing right now that's been done in under 12 months. Okay. So if no delays happen for your particular case, you will be in the United States in under 12 months. Okay. And that is for the E3 skilled workers. That is for the nurses. Okay. Nurse aid is a slightly different process, and it takes much longer. So that would only be true for nurse aides, for registered nurses and for H-1Bs. And sometimes you may hear people talk about retrogression. Is retrogression coming? And what does that mean, right? So right now we know retrogression is true for China and India. That is not the case right now for any other country or any at this point for the E3 registered nurses category. Okay, retrogression is in fact there for the unskilled visa E3 category, and that is the date that I mentioned earlier that they're processing right now for January, for cases that were filed up to January 2020. Okay. There's lots of rumors. You may hear people saying retrogression is going to hit. Nobody knows that for sure. And anybody who says retrogression is going to hit all these categories and is going to hit all these countries, they're just speculating. There's a number of factors that goes into that decision being made to retrogress a particular country. And of course, the number one factor is how many individuals from those countries are already in the United States. And basically, Congress and the NBC is going to be saying, well, we need to give some other country, citizens of some other country, the opportunity to come to the US. So we're going to, retrogress a particular country, meaning we're going to push the visa current availability date out so that to slow it down a little bit, the visas that are being processed for citizens from that particular country. So as we sit here right now today, The only facts that we have that we could look at is what's on the Visa Bulletin. I would not be discouraged or have sleepless night about if your category is going to get retrogressed and if you're in line and then it's going to take much longer. I wouldn't put too much stock into that possibility right now. Like I said, the Visa Bulletin goes up and down. Nobody knows for sure. Attorneys, we're trying to figure out the methodology that goes into it. Nobody knows how the NVC or Congress, with their counterparts in Congress, comes up with this number. We don't know. It's a mystery. But for the most part, what we could say is what we have, the information that we have in front of us right now is countries that are current, and the countries that are in retrogression right now will stay there. And it's possible that the next Visa Bulletin that comes out, all those countries may be moved up by months. So it's uncertain, but we don't know for sure how that works. But don't be discouraged by that. Like I said, that date goes back and forth, it goes up and down, and it's been like that for years. All right. So, how to best prepare for this process? The number one thing I would say is depending on which visa you're trying to get or occupation, just make sure that you have all your documentation together. So when you make contact with Worldwide HealthStaff Solutions and you are assigned, you speak to a recruiting department at first, and then you will speak to our case managers, that you have all your documents that will be required to process your application. So that would be the first thing that I would say, is make sure that all your documentation are readily available, so you could provide that in an efficient way to the case managers. Once we have that information, your information is reviewed, and you, of course, will go through the interview process and get hired by a prospective employer. And then you are in line for your petitions to be filed, depending on if you're a registered nurse or a nurse aide or a MLT applicant. So that would be my best advice, is to have all your documents together. So that would help speed up the process a little bit, because sometimes we have people that are hired and we're waiting for them to get us their documents, and then they're pushed back months because they may miss a window, because by the time they have all their documents over to us, a document that we need from the legal department is no longer available, right? Not to bore you with details, but from the legal side, there are certain things that we need in order to submit your petition. One being a prevailing wage determination from the U.S. Department of Labor, and the other one being a notice of filing, okay? And those documents all have expiration dates. So it is very important that you submit your documents as soon as possible, so that when you are hired, your petition can be filed as soon as possible, of course. All right, so we at about 20 minutes after 9, and we are now at the Q&A section of our webinar, and I'll turn this over to CJ to help us with some of those questions that came in to the chat.
All right, thanks, Anne-Rose. And thank you for all of our viewers right now. We always appreciate that despite your busy schedule, you are always watching our webinars. And yeah, today I'm going to join you with the Q&A session. So I've seen a lot of questions from the chat. So let's start. Okay, so this first question is, let me pick this one. This is from Eunice Breffo, and she said, Can F2 visa be changed to EB3 after passing the NCLEX?
A F2 visa?
Yep, correct.
Yes. So F2 visa, assuming this person is here, the spouse of a student, and then they've benefited from being in the US and passing the NCLEX exam. Now, a F2 visa holder can go out and get his or her own employment. Okay. And then at that point, you could adjust from an F2 visa holder to what we called an LPR, which is a legal permanent resident. And that process, is, of course, is called an adjustment of status because you're moving from a non immigrant status to a immigrant status. Of course, we will have to review to make sure that that individual does not have any issues that would make them removable or inadmissible. But yes, that is possible from an F1 to an EB3 as a permanent residence.
Okay, thanks for that. Next question is, let me check here. Okay, so this one is from Anna K. Grant. She said, hello. So why is it that we as registered nurse were filed under EB or other workers as nurse aides and we are skilled workers from our country? Why weren't we filed under EB3 visa category? I
All
think this
right.
is for nurse aides.
For nurse aides, yes. So nurse aides category is for individuals who were interviewed and were hired for that. I will say if you are a registered nurse in your home country, in order for you to be hired as a registered nurse for a U.S. employer, then you would have to have passed the NCLEX exam. Okay, so if you pass the NCLEX exam and you are currently in line as a nurse aide, the option is you could reach out to your case manager and see if you could now be a candidate for a registered nurse.
All right. Okay, thank you. Next one is from Rekha Gautam. And I think this is just a confirmation a question. And he said, how is interview scheduled? What does priority date and current date mean?
All right. So your priority date is the date that would be on your approval notice, and it will show the date your particular petition was approved. That is your priority date, right? And what that means is, in correlation to the Visa Bulletin, you would have to look to see what is your country of birth and what is the date that is on your actual approval notice as the notice date that your particular petition was approved. So, for instance, if you are a citizen, a country of birth from the Philippines, for example, we know that that country is currently in a current mode on the Visa Bulletin. So what does that mean? You have basically that visa is immediately available to you. You will only be subjected to the processing timeline, and you don't have to wait for a visa to be available to you. So once your petition is approved, you'll move through the process. Your case will move from the USCIS to the NVC rather quickly within a couple of weeks. Because all of our applicants, as a matter of fact, we file what we call a premium processing. And premium processing means that instead of waiting up to months, up to 6 months for your I-140 petition to be approved, that petition will be approved in a matter of weeks. Okay? And then once your petition moves to the NVC then reviews that file. They issue something that's called a fee bill, and that is paying for the visa fee. That gets paid, and then we submit something that we call civil documents. That is documents with all your birth certificate, passport, so forth and so on, your background check. That information gets submitted to the NVC. That is then processed, and then your case moves on for interview. A lot of times, depending on the country that you will be having your interview, you may have a delay. We're seeing delays right now with Riyadh Embassy. They're extremely backlogged. We're seeing not so much delays with the Philippines Embassy. They're moving rather quickly right now. So it's just a matter, you may have a bit of a delay at that point for your waiting for your interview. And we also seen some delays with the embassy in Singapore as well. So it just depends on the embassy that you'll be having your interview. You may have some delays right there. But as I said earlier, we are seeing individuals, arrive in the U.S. in under a year from start to finish. Okay.
All right. Awesome. Okay, next question is this is from Jihan Zeb Khan. He said, I am a citizen of Pakistan and currently working in Kuwait. So where would I process my visa? Will it be on Pakistan or in Kuwait?
That would depend if this individual is in Kuwait for work only, there for temporary. Okay, so if you're in Kuwait and you're going to be there working, that is not your primary residence. Okay, so if you wanted to apply and you wanted to use your address in Pakistan as your address, you could do so. What that means is when it's time for you to have your interview, you would have to fly back to Pakistan for your interview.
All right. So I'm still checking here some questions. Okay. This question is from Shola Bella. And her question is, do you guys petition for F1 student who has exhausted OPT?
So if you're an OPT student, if you have exhausted all your options, the odds are for you to adjust to permanent resident is very limited. Okay. So if you are an F1 student, you are here primarily to go to school, and you are authorized to stay in the U.S. as long as you are registered in school. We do file for F1 students, but we typically do that either while they're almost completed with school, if they have entered into a post OPT program or a STEM OPT program, depending on your area of study. So if you don't have the availability or the option to do post OPT, or depending if you're studying engineering, then you are a STEM OPT, then the answer to that question is no, you will not be able to file for adjustment of status because you will no longer be enrolled in school. So as long as you're enrolled in school, we can actually find you employment as an OPT student.
All right, awesome. And I think this would be our last question for this session. And this is from KJ Pagidian. And he said, can I bring my wife together with me in the US for EB3 visa?
Absolutely. Absolutely, you can. The USCIS makes that possible for spouses to join the primary applicant and for your children who are under the age of 21. So if you are considering moving to the US with an EB3 skilled worker visa, your spouse and all your children under the age of 21 can accompany you to the US. Unfortunately, your parents do not fall under that category right away. You would have to move to the US, and upon obtaining your citizenship, you could then apply to have your parents join you. Absolutely, you could bring your spouse.
All right, awesome. And to add more about what Andrew said, I am also I am a husband of an EB3 nurse. So my wife is also a Worldwide HealthStaff Solutions nurse, and she's working here in the US. So that's why I'm also here in the US, because of my wife. So yeah, I think that's all for the Q&A. And if you have a nurse friend who has an NCLEX and has like a minimum of 1 year current in bedside experience, you can go to our refer a nurse program. I will paste that on the chat. That's healthstaff.org/refer a nurse friend. And if you will refer a nurse with us, you will earn up to $250. And so I will return now to Anne Rose for any last message.
Yes, thank you, CJ. I just want to say thank you to everyone that joined today's webinar. I hope you found it to be very informative and helpful. And I see that there's some people who have some very case-specific questions because you're currently a candidate or with Worldwide Health Staff. I would say refer those questions directly to your case manager for a response. And of course, if you are in queue with the NVC, USCIS, and you think that your case is not being processed in the time which it should, and you're experiencing longer than usual delays, please feel free to reach out to your case manager, who will then reach out to our legal department here at Worldwide Health Staff so we could look into that issue for you and see what's going on there. Again, thank you very much to everyone that joined, and please enjoy the rest of your day or have a great evening depending on where you are. Bye for now.